Hello. All right, we're going to talk about 1910.95, and it's called controlled noise exposure, something like that. But most people just call hearing conservation. Don't say what. Hearing conservation. All right. So it's uh, it's something you probably gonna have to deal with. I know we had to at OK Foods because in the plants, there's not the females and hatcheries stuff like that, but in the plants, because it was noisy in there. You had a lot of equipment, a cement floor, and a lot of moving stuff. So anyhow, 29 CFR 1910-95, occupational noise exposure. And it's got a bunch of appendices. Appendix A, noise exposure computation, mandatory. That's they're pretty technical because if you're dealing with something that's noise is actually pretty technical. You don't think it is because it's all around you. But Appendix B, methods for estimating the adequacy of hearing protector attenuation. We're going to talk about that briefly in a separate PowerPoint. We'll touch on here too, but it's going to be short. Appendix C, audiometric instruments, mandatory. That's technical. D is audiometric test rooms. If you want to do this on your own, you can do this, but you got to have a test room in it. Acoustic calibration of audiometrics. Again, that's pretty technical. Calculation and application of age corrections to audiograms, non-mandatory. And monitoring noise levels, non-mandatory informational appendix. We'll talk about that too. So some of the technical stuff, we're not going to worry about those. Appendix H, availability of reference documents, and then definitions. We're going to cover these definitions, but we're going to cover them right in here. This is unusual. Most standards put the definitions right up front, like in paragraph A is usually like scope type of thing, and paragraph B is usually definitions, but they're sticking in an appendix. So here you go. This is Appendix I, definitions. Action level, an 8-hour time-weighted average of 85 decibels measured on the A scale slow response, or equivalently a dose of 50%. So the main thing is the A scale slow response. When your meter, it'll tell you the A scale, and that'll be pretty obvious. And this is a key thing to know. The action level, 85 decibels. And action level means you got to take action. Audiogram, a chart, graph, or table resulting from an audiometric test showing an individual's hearing threshold levels as a function of frequency. So the audiogram is done, and it's done, it shows it at different frequencies, what your hearing level is. Definitions: audiologist is a professional specializing in the study and rehabilitation of hearing who is certified by the American Speech Language Hearing Association or licensed by a state board of examiners. So you could be one of those audiologists, not necessarily not a doctor. Baseline audiogram. That's the audiogram against which future audiograms are compared. In other words, you first come into the company, you get your hearing tested, and they don't know if it's good, bad, or different. It's your hearing, and not everybody's different, but yeah, pretty much everybody's different. So then next year, when you get another hearing testing, they're going to test it against this one to see if there's a change. And then if there is a change, if it's significant enough, that's called the standard threshold shift. So criterion sound level, that's a sound level of 90 decibels. Okay, you got 85 decibels is the action level, and that's when you have to put a program in, and 90 decibels is when you have to start wearing hearing protection. Most plans don't even do that. Most company policies, they say 85 is the action level. Let's just do it right then and there. So anyhow, a decibel is a unit of measurement of sound level. It's abbreviated small d, capital B. It's a decibel. Hertz is a unit of measurement of frequency, normal numerically equal to cycles per second. Medical pathology is a disorder or disease. For purposes of this regulation, a condition or disease affecting the ear, which should be treated by a physician specialist. Noise dose, the ratio expressed as a percentage of the time integral over stated time or event of the, I'm not going to get into this, 0.0 power of the measured slow exponential time average square a weighted sound pressure and the product of the criterion duration and the power of the squared sound pressure. Yeah, right. Okay. If you want to spend a lot of time looking at that, you go right ahead, but it's something you're not going to have to worry about too much unless you become an audiologist. Noise dosimeter, that's an instrument that integrates a function of sound pressure over a period of time in such a manner that it directly indicates a noise dose. Okay, so it's a noise measuring device, but a dosimeter is different than a meter. A dosimeter is something that a person wears on them for their entire shift. And it's not say a lot more, but it's more accurate than just a sound meter. Otolaryngologist is a physical physician specializing in diagnosis and treatment of disorders of the ear, nose, and throat. So it's an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Representative exposure, measurement of an employee's noise dose or 8-hour time-weighted average sound level that the employer is deemed to be representative of the exposure of the other employees in the workplace. So in other words, if you had one person wearing this dosimeter and there you could say that's it, then everybody else that does that same job, that's a representative exposure for them too. Sound level, 10 times the common logarithm of the ratio of the square. There we go again with the measured A-weighted sound pressure. And there's a formula in there if you want to look at it, but it's something that's we're going to worry about measuring sound with meters, and that's about it. Sound level meter, instrument for the measurement of sound level. Now, a dosimeter and a sound level meter are different. Sound level meter just measures it right here, right now. Time-weighted average sound level, that sound level, which is if constant over 8-hour exposure, would result in the same noise dose as is measured. So this is, now we're going to get into it. Now, noise-induced hearing loss can be temporary or permanent. It can be temporary, but even a lot of temporaries could add up to a permanent. Short-term temporary hearing loss results from short-term exposure to noise with normal hearing returning after a period of rest. Do you ever get in your pickup truck or your car and you get in there and start it up and think, man, that radio is kind of loud, and you turn it back down a little bit? Well, the reason for that is the last time you were in that vehicle driving around, you turn the radio up because, and the noise of driving, the wind noise, the truck noise or whatever, and the radio noise, you temporarily lost some hearing. So when you were driving along, that was fine. But then when you got out, your hearing went back pretty much to normal. So the next time you got in it, radio sounds real loud now. So that's the reason for that happens. So you do have some temporary. It can be temporary, but still that temporaries can add up. Prolonged exposure to high noise levels over a period of time gradually causes permanent hearing loss. Very unusual to have hearing loss occur like right now. So it takes a lot of time. They can have a humongous, well, I'm sure it could break your eardrums, but gradually it's a little bit insidious because it kind of sneaks up on you because you don't really realize it until you're saying, huh, all the time. So when to do noise monitoring. Not every employer has to measure workplace noise. Not everybody has to do it. Only when exposures are at above 85 decibels. Well, if you don't measure it, how are you going to know, right? But this is kind of I don't want to use a thermometer for it, but a noise thermometer. So you can see a classroom chat at like 70 decibels, freight train 100 feet away, 80 decibels, construction site about 100 decibels, boiler room 90, a nightclub with music 110, getting pretty loud then. Operating heavy equipment at 120, a jet taking off even 300 feet away, it's 130. And about 140 starts to be painful. So, and you can see when you get down to conversations, 3 feet away is about 60 decibels. So when to do noise monitoring. So if you haven't done any monitoring, how do you know if it's 85 decibels or not? Well, you can have there's a couple of things you can use as a pretty good idea. Employee complaints about the loudness of the noise. Say, hey, it's noisy in here. Indications that employees are losing their hearing. How you know that testing them, I don't know. But here's the main thing. Noisy conditions which make normal conversation difficult. When people are standing at a normal, maybe about 3 feet apart, roughly, just standing there talking, having a normal conversation in the workplace. If you can't carry on a normal conversation, then there's probably a need to do some audiometric, some noise monitoring. That's not audiometric testing, but noise monitoring. So that's probably the best thing. Noise emitted from specific machines. A particular machine can do it. I've mentioned this before. In California, we had a picker that was a machine that tore stuff apart. So it had a big drum. I mean, a huge drum, and it was heavy, had teeth in it, and it rotated, and it was making so much noise. We said, well, man, we have to do something about this because we're going to have a hearing program if somebody's working, and somebody had to work near it. So we looked at it, and so we did 3 things to it. We took it apart. I didn't do this, but my guys did. And we sent out the thing that rotated out to be balanced. So we had somebody balance it for us. And so that was number one. We replaced the bearings in it, both sides. But more importantly, I think is I did this. I found out these things at the bottom. I bought this material. You buy it in a sheet, and I remember how big it was, and it was about 1 inch thick. And you put that between the four legs of how many legs the machine has. This one had four legs that were about 6 inches by 6 inches, where they were bolted to the floor, and you put those between the floor and the machine, because you can imagine a piece of cast iron machinery sitting on a concrete floor. It's going to make a lot of noise. And after we did all three of those, I turned that machine on. You couldn't even hardly hear it running. It was a huge difference. So there's a lot you can do, a lot of engineering controls. Kind of basically, they were not more control. They were just maintenance, basically, except for maybe the pads. They might be considered engineering controls. But there's things you can do to make machines less noisy. Another one we had was a machine that was an old machine that was guarded by a expanded metal cage around it, and it was kind of noisy. So we bought some of that egg crate looking stuff. I don't know what you call it, the noise reducer, and put it on not all the way around it because we wanted to see it, but we put it in certain places, and that cut down the noise too. So there's things you can do to cut down noise in your workplace. So actual workplace noise measurements can suggest whether or not a monitoring program should be initiated. Now, it's required whenever employees, a hearing conservation program is required whenever employee noise exposures equal or exceed an 8-hour time-weighted average sound level of 85 decibels, measured on the A scale slow response, or equivalently a dose of 50%. All right, now how do you know that? Well, you can download a sound meter on your phone. And I did that when I worked at OK Foods, and we had a sound meter too. And so one day we were going through the plant in Heaver, and the guy that worked for me, who was at the time, he was using that and I was using this, and we were just doing some spot checks. And that one on my phone and the one we bought, they were the same. I mean, if he got 78 decibels, I was looking at 78 decibels. So they're pretty accurate, the ones on your phone. The hearing conservation program. Now, this is you've established you've got some noise level of 85 decibels or above. You got to put a program in. So it consists of monitoring, employee training, hearing protection, and audiograms. So, and if you're going to do monitoring, you allow employees or the representatives the opportunity to observe any noise measurements. They're allowed to do that. You notify each employee exposed at or above the 8-hour time-weighted average of 85 decibels of the results of the monitoring. And this program will be at no cost to the employees. No surprise there, right? So how is noise measured? Well, two different instruments to measure noise exposures by two different methods: the sound level meter for area monitoring and the dosimeter for personal monitoring. On both. Area monitoring is a sound level meter measures noise at a given moment, at a given place. To estimate employee noise exposures with a sound level meter, it is generally necessary to take several measurements at different locations within the workplace. After appropriate sound level meter readings are obtained, people sometimes draw maps of the sound levels within different areas of the workplace. By using a sound level map and information on employee locations throughout the day, estimates of individual exposure levels can be developed. I did this at the Huebner feed mill, and there were some places that were really lousy, really noisy, and some that weren't. But the only people that really went into those places were the maintenance people. Now, they weren't where somebody worked all the time. It's a feed mill and it's semi-automated. So what I did was I took measurements throughout the building, and then I sat down with the maintenance people and I got, okay, now what percent of time do you think you work in all these different areas? And then I did that. So even though there was maybe 110 decibels over here, and it was only, so over there, and that's what I did. And I estimate the individual exposure levels for them. And when the OSHA inspector was there at the Huebner feed mill after we had the explosion, the combustible dust explosion, they asked about that, and I showed them that, and they looked at it, and they didn't rip on it. So I guess it didn't get written up for it. So I guess it was okay. But that's what a sound level meter. So you're holding your hand and you measure it right here. So you can do, and they're pretty accurate. I mean, they're acceptable. But if you have a place that's especially, they're really best if the noise is the same, or almost the same in each area. In other words, one area doesn't have a whole big fluctuation. But this area might be noisy. This area might not be. But so personal monitoring is a dosimeter. It stores sound level measurements and integrates these measurements over time, providing an average noise exposure reading for a given period of time. such as an 8-hour workday. With a dosimeter, a microphone is attached to the employee's clothing, and the exposure measurement is simply read at the end of the desired time period. You don't have to do it for 8 hours. It'll calculate it for you. But a reader may be used to read out the dosimeter's measurements. Since the dosimeter is worn by the employee, it measures noise levels in those locations in which the employee travels. And the idea is you put it here because that's where their ear is. You put like on their collar, so close to their ear, and they wear that all day long. They wear it at lunchtime, they go to the break, bathroom, whatever, they still wear it. They wear it all day long. And then you get an 8-hour time weighted average from that. That's probably the most accurate, but they're a little bit of a pain. When I first got to OK Foods, I was too busy to worry about this. But after a couple of months, the guy before me had purchased these dosimeters. So, cool. I'm going to get them out and get this thing going. And they didn't work. I never used them. So I called the manufacturer and I says, oh, well, yeah, we have a problem with it. But it's been too long since it's been, because it took me 6 months to get around to it because I was too busy with other things. And he had bought them 6 months before. So it's been a year. So they were going to give me like $1,500 discount on if I spent $7,500 on a new system, and I told them to go pound salt. So I wasn't going to buy anything from them ever again. So anyhow, the dosimeter is good too, but you can also get some people to help you out. Maybe a Kaimechi or somebody like that can help you out sometimes too. You might be able to rent this stuff too. But a meter itself, like I said, you can download on your phone. That's actually pretty good. Okay, how's noise measured? In situations where personal monitoring is appropriate, proper positioning of the microphone is necessary to obtain accurate measurements. With a dosimeter, the microphone is generally located on the shoulder and remains in that position for the entire workday. Why the shoulder? Because that's close to your ear. With a sound level meter, the microphone is stationed near the employee's head, and the instrument is usually held by an individual who follows the employee as he or she moves about. I never seen that happen. I don't think it would make a lot of sense. You'd have to be reading it all the time too and writing it down. So you could, but that doesn't make much sense to me. How's noise measured? Okay. Manufacturer's instructions. You ever heard that before? Manufacturer's instructions contained in dosimeter and sound level meter operating manuals should be followed for calibration and maintenance. If you haven't figured it out by now, manufacturer's instructions are almost as good as OSHA regulations. In fact, you can have been, and I have been written up for something, I'd say but OK Foods was, for not following the manufacturer's instructions. So anyhow, to ensure accurate results, it's considered good professional practice to calibrate instruments before and after each use. Noise monitoring equipment may either be purchased or rented. Sound level meters cost about $500 to $1,000, while dosimeters range in price from about $750 to $1,500. They're probably a lot more than that now. Smaller companies may find it more economical to rent equipment rather than to purchase it. So again, how's noise measured? Area monitoring can be used to estimate noise exposure when the noise levels are relatively constant and employees aren't too mobile. And personal monitoring is best in workplaces where employees move about in different areas or where the noise intensity tends to fluctuate over time. Again, the action level, 8-hour time weight on average of 85 decibels is the action level. The hearing conservation program must be put into place. The employer shall notify each employee exposed of the results of the monitoring. And you can post this up on the wall or bulletin board. So how often do you have to measure noise? Well, where there are significant changes in machinery or production processes that may result in increased noise levels by all means. But many companies choose to remonitor periodically, once every year or two, to ensure that all exposed employees are included in their hearing conservation programs. If you have a mobile test van come in every year, they'll do it for you. They'll charge you for it, of course. But if you just want to have them take it off your hands, they'll do it. They'll come in and do your monitoring for you. But that's not that big a deal to do it with a meter. There's a lot of science that goes into noise measurement. You probably never use it, so we're not going to study it, and won't be on a test. Some of the things we talked about. So a decent sound level meter, again, is available as an app for your phone. And like I said, they're not bad. So here's a scenario. You do some noise test measurements all around the place, and you kind of figured out the employees are subject to 82 decibels time weighted average. So what do you do next? Well, nothing. It's below the action level. So the action level 85 decibel means no hearing conservation program is necessary. So it's 82. You measure all the places, you get an 83 or 84 here, maybe an 85 or 86 once in a while, but most of them are 80, 81, 82. You don't have to do anything. Now, after measurement, the TWA has been determined to be 85 decibels or above. Now what? Bingo, hearing conservation program must be put into place. Does that mean everybody has to start wearing hearing protection? No, it means you have to put in a hearing conservation program. So again, there's your action level again. Why am I saying that? Because it's very important you know what an action level is. 85 decibels, and it means you got to put a program in. And again, audiogram, I'm going to repeat some of these definitions that are important. It's a chart, graph, or table resulting from an audiometric test showing an individual's hearing threshold levels as a function of frequency. Audiologist is a professional specializing in the study and rehabilitation of hearing. A baseline audiogram is the audiogram against which future audiograms are compared. So they don't, if you have, when you start, let's call that 0. When you start, you have an audiogram. And at the end of 1, you get an audiogram. They compare it to your baseline. End of the year 2, you get an audiogram. They don't compare to last year. They compare it to your baseline. Criterion sound level is a sound level of 90 decibels. So you get the action level and the criterion sound level. Why they call them like two completely different ways, I don't know what it is. Decibels, unit of measurement of sound level. Hertz is a unit of measurement of frequency, numerically equivalent to cycles per second. So that's the frequency, it's a hertz. A noise dosimeter is an instrument that integrates a function of sound pressure. So it's basically, it measures noise. Cut to the chase here. Otolaryngologist is a physician specializing in diagnosis and treatment of disorders of the ear, nose, and throat. Representative exposure, so measure of an employee's noise dose or an 8-hour time weighted average sound level that the employer is deemed to be representative of the exposures of other employees in the workplace. So you stick a dosimeter on one person in this department and they measure something, and you can pretty much say, well, they all do the same thing in the department. So that's a representative exposure. Okay, did I tell you this before? A 8-hour time weighted average 85 decibels or a dose of 50% shall be referred to as the action level. So the action level, just say 85 decibels. That's what people mostly say, but it's actually an 8-hour time weighted average of 85 decibels. Repeat. Maybe you think I want you to know this. 8-hour time weighted average of 85 decibels shall also be referred to as the action level. That might be on a test. Just saying. Okay, now B1. When employees are subjected to sound exceeding those listed in table G16, which we'll talk about, feasible administrative or engineering controls shall be utilized. Here you go, administrative or engineering controls. Heard them before? If such controls fail to reduce sound levels within the levels of G16, personal protective equipment shall be provided and used to reduce sound levels within the levels of the table. As I discussed a little bit, you can do some engineering controls and administrative controls to reduce noise in the workplace. Another administrative control you can use is rotate people around. So, but if all else fails, guess what? What's the bottom line? PPE. So this is duration, the sound level, dBA, sound level, slow response, 80. There's 90, okay, it's 90, over 8 hours, duration 8 hours, it's 90 decibels. Again, that was your criterion noise level. And then you can see for 6 hours, 92, 4 hours, 95, 5, and for 1 hour, be 105. So that's the well, you have to put in, people still have to wear hearing protection. You have to do engineering administrative controls or PPE. So the hearing conservation program consists of monitoring, which you talked about, employee training, which we're going to talk about right now. Train each employee who is exposed to noise at or above an 8-hour time weighted average of 85 decibels. The training program shall be repeated annually for each employee included in the hearing conservation program. Information provided in the training program shall be updated to be consistent with changes in protective equipment and work processes. So, all right, it's annual for each employee included in the hearing conservation program. And it's got to be updated if there's change in the workplace or equipment or process, anything like that. You have to update your training. Employer shall ensure that each employee is informed of the following: how noise affects on hearing and hearing loss, the purpose of hearing protectors, the advantages, disadvantages, and attenuation of various types, and instructions on selection, fitting, use, and care of hearing protectors, the purpose of audiometric testing, and an explanation of the test procedures, location within the company where hearing protection is required. It's not necessarily going to be required throughout the company, but there's one company, I forget who it was we visited, and one half the plant had to have hearing protection, and the other half didn't. And there was a big aisle down the middle, and that didn't work out too well because you saw people crossing all the time. Employers shall make available to affected employees or their representatives copies of this standard and shall also post a copy in the workplace. So you have to post a copy of this if you're in the program of this standard in the workplace. So now we're going to talk about the next step, hearing protection. Employers shall make hearing protectors available to all employees exposed to an 8-hour time-weighted average of 85 decibels or greater at no cost to the employees. Now you notice we haven't said they have to wear it, but you have to make it available to them. You're only at the 85 decibel limit. That's all you have established now. So you're not up at 90 yet. Yours 86, 87. You have to have a hearing conservation program and make hearing protectors available and train them. You do the training every year too. Hearing protectors shall be replaced as necessary. Okay. Now, what do you think this last sentence means? Ben said they didn't want to handle it, basically, I guess. So when is it as necessary means you'll have to figure that out for yourself. They used to give at OK Foods these hearing things out like always, like every time after break. It was ridiculous. Even though they're not very expensive, you got 3,000 employees, it adds up. So then they started giving them out, I think, once a week to the people, and they're fine once a week. You know, it's something you wouldn't want to be sharing with somebody else. But your own, you keep them for once a week and put them in your ears and take care of them. They'll last for a long time. So as necessary, that's going to have to be defined by what your company does, policies and stuff like that. So of course, now if somebody doesn't have them, and we talked about that many times about what do you do if somebody loses their PPE? Well, you can make them pay for it. That's your company policy is going to kick in there. Employees shall be given the opportunity to select their hearing protectors from a variety of suitable hearing protectors provided by the employer. Now, you know darn well the employers want to give the cheapest ones they can. I can't say I blame them. So, but if you have somebody that just demands to have some kind of instead of plugs, they want muffs, you got to give it to them. So the employer shall provide training in the use and care of all hearing protectors. That's part of your training. And the employer shall ensure proper initial fitting and supervise the correct use of all hearing protectors. You also have to show them how to put it in, show them how to take it off, show them how, at least tell them how to take care of it, and supervise the correct use. They have to in other words, they have to make sure that they're being used. That was a big problem at OK Foods. Employers shall ensure that hearing protectors are worn by an employee who is required by paragraph B1 of this section to wear personal protective equipment, was that table we saw, by any employee who is exposed to an 8-hour time-weighted average 85 decibels. Now this is where the kind of step one is. 85 decibels greater and who has not yet had a baseline audiogram established pursuant to paragraph G5, which we haven't done yet, or an employee has experienced a standard threshold shift. So this is still at 85 decibels. So again, there's that table again. So summary, employers shall ensure the hearing protectors are worn by employees exposed to 90 decibels, 8 hours or more, 90 decibel, 8-hour time-weighted average. 90 decibels, you have to wear hearing protection, okay? That's not debatable. Between 85 and 90, you don't have to wear them, but at 90, you gotta wear them. Now, between 85 and 90, you're in the hearing conservation program and getting trained, and they're provided, but at 90, you gotta wear them. So, and by an employee is exposed to 8-hour time-weighted average of 85, and this is before the mobile test band exclusion, which we'll talk about in a little bit, or they've experienced a standard threshold shift, which means that they're hearing they lost hearing since their baseline, and that's a OSHA recordable injury or illness. The adequate hearing protector attenuation shall be reevaluated whenever employee noise exposure increased to the extent that the hearing protectors provided may no longer provide adequate attenuation. The employer shall provide more effective hearing protectors where necessary. So attenuation means how much does that hearing protector stop, how much noise. Evaluate hearing protector attenuation for the specific noise environments in which the protector will be used. The employer shall use one of the evaluation methods described in Appendix B, which we'll talk about in a separate real short video. Methods for estimating the adequacy of hearing protector attenuation. Employees who have experienced a significant threshold shift, hearing protector attenuation must be sufficient to reduce employee exposure to a TW of 85 decibels. So they have a standard threshold shift. Okay, so here's what you do. Using a sound measure level meter set to A weighting network and slow response, obtain the employee's A weighted time weighted average. Now the NRR, the noise reduction rating, it's shown on the packaging of every piece of hearing protection you get. Maybe on the box of the hearing protectors, and not on each individual pack if you buy them in bulk. I mean, of the earplugs. It's going to have a noise reduction rating. Well, if it's 25, you're going to subtract 7 from that, and you're going to get 18. Okay, and so you subtract the remainder, which would be in this case 18, for the A weighted time weighted average to obtain the estimated A weighted time weighted average under the ear protector. So if you measured it and it was 95, you're going to take 18 from it. So 95, it's 75, 77. That will be fine. You're under it. If the noise is, so you take the NRR, the noise reduction rating of that piece of equipment, the hearing protection, your plugs, muffs, or whatever, and then you deduct 7 from that because they're saying, well, yeah, they're not going to be that good. And then you do you get this, you find out what the sound levels give noise level is, and you deduct that NR minus 7 from that, and that's going to tell you what the noise should be under that ear protector. That's what they're hearing. The noise is getting to their ear. There are many other methods, but this is the simplest and probably the most commonly used. So an example, here you go. TWA is 92, NR, the hearing protector is 20, so 20 minus 7 is 13, so 92 minus 13, 79. You're good. Hearing protectors must attenuate employee exposure to at least an 8-hour time weighted average of 90 decibels as required by paragraph B of this section. For employees who have experienced a standard threshold shift, hearing protectors must attenuate employee exposure to an 8-hour time weighted average of 85 decibels or below. That's why you need to figure this out. So if you had a standard threshold shift, they may need better hearing protection. They may have to wear both, monitors and muffs. So now the last part of the hearing conservation program consists of audiograms, which are basically hearing tests. The employer shall establish and maintain an audiometric testing program by making audiometric testing available to all employees whose exposures equal or exceed an 8-hour time weighted average of 85 decibels. So all employees are exposed to 85 and up, get tested. Audiometric tests shall be performed by a licensed or certified audiologist, otolaryngologist, or other physician, or by a certified technician. The guys come around and your mobile test vans are certified technicians. And the company we used to use, they had a couple that did this, and since they were on the road all the time, they were a married couple. They didn't have a home. They lived and of course the company paid for them living out there. So they went like for 5 years. That's what they did. And they did this like all the time, as much as hours as they could. Guess what? There 5 years, they quit and bought a home, pay cash for it because they didn't have any expenses during that period of time, practically. Pretty smart. Hearing testing has 4 important elements: the baseline audiograms, annual audiograms, training, and follow-up. So within 6 months of an employee's first exposure at or above the action level, which is what? Boy, I hope you know that, 85 decibels, do a baseline audiogram against which subsequent audiograms can be compared. So here's the mobile test van exception. Sometimes OSHA takes life into consideration. So where mobile test vans are used to meet the audiometric testing obligation, the employer shall obtain a valid baseline audiogram within 1 year of an employee's first exposure at or above the action level. I mean, you can't bring a van in there to test one person. So where baseline audiograms are obtained more than 6 months after the employee's first exposure at or above the action level, employees shall wear hearing protectors for any period exceeding 6 months after first exposure to the baseline audiogram. So even though they haven't been tested yet, know what their hearing is because the van hasn't come yet. If it's more than 6 months, they ought to have to wear hearing protection. If they're subject to 85 decibels, if it's your noise you've measured is below that, no. Testing to establish a baseline audiogram shall be proceeded by at least 14 hours without exposure to workplace noise. That's an odd number for an OSHA regulation, 14 hours, but there must be some reason for it. Hearing protectors may be used as a substitute for the requirement that baseline audiograms be preceded by 14 hours without exposure to workplace noise. So in other words, notify employees of the need to avoid high levels of non-occupational noise exposure during a 14-hour period immediately preceding the audiometric examination, but you can't make them. You can't make employees do something on their off time, but you can let them know, but you can have them preceded by at least 14 hours without exposure to workplace noise. And if for some reason you can't do that, then make them wear hearing protection for that 14 hours. At least annually after obtaining the baseline audiogram, the employer shall obtain a new audiogram for each employee exposed at or above 8-hour time-limited average of 85 decibels, at least annually. Each employee's annual audiogram shall be compared to that employee's baseline audiogram to determine if the audiogram is valid and if a standard threshold shift has occurred. This comparison may be done by a technician, and it's usually done by the people, and they'll tell you right away. These are pretty good at what they do, the ones in the van. If the annual audiogram shows that an employee has suffered a standard threshold shift, the employer may obtain a retest within 30 days and consider the results of the retest as an annual audiogram. If the who's doing the test is sharp and they have the information from the last test and this happens, they'll retest them right away. So that's what you want to do, because sometimes people just mess up on the tests. If a comparison of the annual audiogram to the baseline audiogram indicates a standard threshold has occurred, the employee shall be informed of this fact in writing within 21 days of the determination. So don't let that lag. You got to let them know in writing. Unless the physician determines that the standard threshold shift is not work-related or aggravated by occupational noise exposure, the employer shall ensure that the following steps are taken when the standard threshold shift occurs. Employees not using hearing protectors shall be fitted with hearing protectors, trained in their use and care, and required to use them so that they have a standard threshold shift. And employees already using hearing protectors shall be refitted and retrained in the use of hearing protectors and provided with hearing protectors offer greater attenuation. So it says first case, if they haven't been using them yet, oops. If they're not using hearing protectors, they need to have them. If they are using them, they got to get better ones. The employee shall be referred for a clinical audiological evaluation or an otological examination as appropriate if additional testing is necessary, or if the employer suspects that a medical pathology of the ear is caused or aggravated by the wearing of hearing protectors. The employee is informed of the need for an otological examination if a medical pathology of the ear that is unrelated to the use of hearing protectors is suspected. One of the things we did, the guys at the hearing, the van said they gave a questionnaire, and they have been shooting guns, and there's been concerts. Now, how many 20-year-olds in around here haven't shot guns or been to a concert? So, some of them say no, but I'm not sure. So then they would talk to the people and try to determine if their hearing loss was work-related or not. Sometimes they would say no, and they said, I shoot guns all the time without hearing protection. Guess what? Chances are that your hearing loss is not going to be considered work-related. An annual audiogram may be substituted for the baseline audiogram when, in the judgment of the otologist, otolaryngologist, or physician who is evaluating the program, the standard threshold shift revealed by the audiogram is persistent, or the hearing threshold shown in the annual audiogram indicates significant improvement over the baseline audiogram. So that's possible. Maybe your baseline audiogram, you had a cold or something, just wasn't right. So an annual audiogram may be used. You can get a new baseline audiogram basically, but it has to be the audiologist, otolaryngologist, or physician. And so the employer shall maintain an accurate record of all employee exposure measurements. The employer shall retain all employee audiometric test records. The employer shall retain test records for at least the following periods. Noise exposure measurement records shall be retained for 2 years. So that's your measurements with your dosimeter or your meter. You got to retain it for 2 years. Audiometric test records shall be retained for the duration of the affected employee's employment. So for as long as they're an employee. Now, what happens if you go out of business, you sell the company to somebody else? Well, you got to transfer those records to the successor employer. All records required to be maintained by this section. And paragraph C3 under this section shall not apply to employers engaged in oil and gas well drilling and servicing operations. Again, they're putting this at the end. That's unusual. Most regulations put that right in the front. So this is a sample program adopted from the Texas Occupational Safety and Health Consultation Program. OSHCON, okay. And to objective, to minimize occupational hearing loss by providing hearing protection, training, and annual hearing testing to all persons working in areas with a noise level at or above an 8-hour time-weighted average of 85 decibels measured on the A scale of sound level meter. Okay. A copy of the standard will also be posted in areas with affected employees. Responsibility management. Use engineering and administrative controls to limit exposure. Always a good idea. Provide adequate hearing protection. Conduct noise surveys annually. This is an example program. They're saying do it annually, which is a good idea. And whenever new equipment or processes are introduced, conduct annual hearing testing, conduct hearing conservation training for all new employees and annually for all employees. Employees use company-provided hearing protection in designated areas, request new hearing protection when needed, exercise proper care of issued hearing protection. Noise monitoring will be conducted by the safety department. Supervisors must notify the safety department when there is a possible need for monitoring. Makes sense. Monitoring will be performed with sound level meters and personal dosimeters at the discretion of the safety department. Say you want to have some flexibility, so you can do it for different use of different stuff for different situations. Monitoring will be conducted when there is a change in equipment, processes, or controls that affects noise level. Each supervisor must notify the safety department when these changes are instituted. So they're laying a little bit on the supervisor. Hey, if you get a piece of equipment in here that's noisier than the other stuff, you gotta let the safety department know. Employee training will be conducted by the safety department or designated representatives. Will be done at initial orientation and annually thereafter. When we had the van come in, we get the people in the break room ahead, a group ahead of the van, sit them down and go through that training with the manual training. It doesn't take that long. So, and will be done at initial orientation and annually thereafter. It'll consist of how noise affects hearing and hearing loss, review of the OSHA standard, explanation of audiometric testing, rules and procedures, location where hearing protection is required, and how to use and care for hearing protectors. This policy is. And it will be maintained by the safety department, training records. Hearing protection will be worn by all personnel in designated areas, will be provided at no cost to employees. Employees will have the opportunity to choose from at least 2 different types of hearing protection. 2 might not be enough. Personal listening devices such as headphones are not approved for hearing protection and are not to be used in any operation area of company property. Now, guess what? There have been hearing protection headphones. I have a pair of those. I use them when I mow the lawn. I also put earmuffs over it too because it's really loud. And so you can get those, but you want to look at them. Maybe talk to your people about this if you want to use them. What time we consolidated with a company in Carson, California, under Western Auto. Actually, they bought us, Bonafide products. But they became the safety guy, and they had a pillow department. And the pillow department's kind of noisy, blowing pillows in and stuff. And they had a boom box in there, and they had the hearing protection in there. We had in the hearing protection program in there, and I said, what the heck? How come this boombox has blasted? Oh, yeah, we got it with this hearing protection. We can't hear the music. I says, wait a minute. You got a noisy area and you have a boombox? I don't think so. I wasn't very popular there because I made them take it out. So you're not going to inject 90 decibels of music into an area that's already too loud. Ridiculous. Signage is required in all areas where hearing protection is required. Preformed earplugs, the earmuffs should be washed periodically and stored in a clean area. I don't know why they put that in there. That should be a part of the training, but foam inserts should be discarded after each use. Hands should be washed before handling earplugs and inserts before they are placed in the ears. Audiograms hearing tests. Affected employees will have both a baseline and annual audiogram. I don't need to say that. Your audiogram will be provided by the company at no cost to the employee. You put that in there just so the employees know. The baseline audiogram will be given in the first month of employment and before any exposure to high noise levels. Annual audiograms will be performed within 1 year from the date of the previous audiogram. The safety department will schedule the audiograms. Now, it doesn't say you have to do everybody at one time. So you may have a local clinic or something that does audiograms for you. A local somebody does that. And so you might not do everybody at one time like you would do with a mobile test van. So it depends. You might be out in the building somewhere and only have 37 employees. And so you send them down to the clinic and they do one for you. Just got to keep track of it. That's all. If an annual audiogram shows an employee has suffered a standard threshold shift, the employee will be retested within 30 days. If the retest confirms the STS, the employee will be notified in writing within 21 days. Put that in your policy. Good idea. These employees will be refitted with hearing protection and provided more training on the effects of noise. Good idea. Record retention. Noise exposure measurements, monitoring records shall be retained for 2 years. Audiometric test records shall be maintained for the duration of the employee's employment. Wonder where they got that. Oh, wait, that's in the standard, huh? Good idea to put that in your policy. So, hearing conservation, be sure to read the standard. All right. That was pretty long, but it's very important. There's a pretty good chance, no matter where you work, there's going to be some noise. And if it's not enough to get you into understand it, that's fine. Measure it. Download a simple thing on your phone. And I have one on my phone. I don't know if I can find it real quick. Here, it's called. Mine is called. You probably can't see that. It's just called Decibel X, I think. What it looks like. There you go. What's the noise jump up when I talk? That's it. Pretty simple. So again, these work pretty well. So I wouldn't go spending any money right off the bat until I did this on my phone and checked it out. All right, that's a good bit. We're going to talk about a couple other things here in hearing conservation before we're done. So in the meantime, be safe.